I've submitted a lot of talks, and some of them I was actually very excited about and actually bummed when they didn't get accepted in years past. Last year was the first time where, as I was like putting the talks together, I was like preemptively pissed because I was like, I know they're not going to accept any of these.
Butterscotch shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 530 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm the musical ladies programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm the artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's July 18th, 2025.
July 18th.
Before we started, July 18th.
Yeah.
Don't forget it. That's the date. Before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bsguys.net for your monthly donations to help keep the podcast going. And we have a fresh piping hot donation with a message. This one comes with a message. This is from Hot Claw, who says, "Hi, Sam's dejected answer to the last question of episode 527 made me incredibly sad."
Wait, I don't remember what it was.
Well, all right. I've listened, watched, and played everything you've created and love all of it. Also, you literally saved my life. Diagnosis, meds, etc. The stuff you make for others matters.
Oh, thanks.
So that was, I think, it was part of when we were talking about how hard it is to make stuff and how people just shit on it all the time.
Or not, or just not.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Because I was getting to the point where it's like, because you stop putting stuff out after a while. Because you're like, whatever.
Yeah, because it invisibly helps people, invisibly pisses people off. You know,
well, I guess there's an addendum there too, though, which is that the energy I've pivoted away from in that has actually, in many ways, just gone back into the games directly. If that makes sense. I spend a lot less time talking about how we're making them, trying to share techniques, like all that stuff. I'm just like, I think it's most important that I just put all of my juice into the game first. And then if anybody wants to know how some part of it works after the fact, then maybe I'll talk about it then. But I'm not going to do it in progress, like, and delay the launch, basically, if that makes sense. Just mentally for me, it's kind of where I'm at with it. So it's kind of a redirection of the juice into either family or just the products themselves, as opposed to other stuff on top of that,
Yeah. So, that was a little bit of a bummer of a conversation, but, things are still good. Everything's fine.
The reality is, like, it's just hard to maintain that, like, a creative optimism, just kind of.
It's just hard.
It's hard. For anybody who's doing any public works like that. So but I appreciate you showing up.
And I mean, the more exposed you are, the more you get that. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword kind of a thing.
Oh yeah.
It's like, it's good that, like, to have an audience, but then also it sucks to have an audience. You know what I mean? That's okay. But yeah, thanks for the donation.
On that note, GDC Talks missions have opened up. So for everybody listening who, is considering putting a talk together and stuff, that was just your little reminder.
Do it.
And then we can decide if we want to talk about how we feel about that or not. Because I think we decided we're not submitting anything.
It's kind of the same, actually. It's actually similar. Where it's in years past, we'll literally sit down, we make a spreadsheet. Each of us submits like 6 pitches. Not even kidding. So we send like a fucking barrage of opportunities into
we sent a textbook worth of information over there.
Last year I sent 3 because everybody else in the team was heads down, super busy trying to get the game done, and I was like, if we can get a talk right before we launch the game, that seems like good timing, so so I submitted 3, and one got rejected and the other 2 neither got rejected nor accepted. So I'm like, did anybody fucking read this?
Like, what? Wild. I didn't know that.
I know.
Well, this is the crazy thing about GDC Talks is so Adam's been rejected for all of his talks.
Yeah, I must have submitted at least a dozen at this point.
Yeah, and every single one of them would have been so incredibly helpful to people. Yeah. And it's so much of it is about, like, they're accepting talk. They have a limited pool, and they're accepting talks that like they think are kind of like sexy. You know what I mean? Like ones that have ones that appeal to like brand new developers, that kind of thing. And like Adam tends to really like get into the, like, here's a really important problem that most people probably don't even know about, and here's how you think about it, and here's how you can solve it.
Yeah, they're looking for things in the shape of a TED Talk, right? Which is that it has like the vibe of being like earth-shattering and really important, but once you like step back and reevaluate it, you're like, wait a second.
But it's not really that big.
It's actually not anything.
And that's not to say that the talks aren't like they are very useful. It's just like target.
Yeah, there are
audience.
many great ones. Definitely.
Yeah, target audience for like Adam's expertise in particular is just like a narrower, deeper piece that would be very useful to have a public stage for, actually, right? Because it hits so many people, but so many people don't necessarily know that it will hit them, if that makes sense. And so that's been the struggle on that side. But then even like, I think, Seth and I have managed to give talks in the past. I think both of us were like nearly the top rated speakers of GDC the years we went. I think I was like number 3 or 4 or 5, something like that. Like top 10,
Yeah. And if you haven't seen
we haven't gotten
talks, like they're all up on YouTube, so you can just look for them. Although you can't search by name, I don't think, on the GDC thing. So
since we gave banger talks, we haven't gotten any more accepted, which is funny. You know what I mean? So basically the vibe there for us is, we talked about it in our quarterly a couple of days ago. It's kind of similar to this burnout thing, which is like, okay, we could spend a lot of time and energy on that, trying to pitch some of these things, but it'd probably be better if we went like after we had such a big success that it was.
We want people banging down our door demanding we give talks. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to feel like we are sort of forcing our way in there at this point. You know what I mean?
Well, that's last year, I guess, on that note of like that kind of downer vibe of people just being like, no, last year was the first, because each I've submitted a lot of talks, and some of them I was actually very excited about and actually bummed when they didn't get accepted in years past. But mostly I know like there's such a random element. There's so much competition for the spots and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, it didn't really bother me besides just the normal like rejection, but last year was the first time where, as I was like putting the talks together, I was like preemptively pissed because I was like, I know they're not going to accept any of these. and I started to have the sense of like, because I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, which was like boiling down some element of expertise, some complicated problem that is a lot of people have to deal with in games that I haven't seen good solutions for, or I haven't seen good like breakdowns of. So I know this thing is needed, and I'm working through this, and I'm preemptively like, who are the people who are evaluating me are fucking randos, like they're somehow associated with GDC. Who knows? But I'm going to get you get a random judge who decides like based on their expertise, which I know, like the whole point of what I'm doing is I'm like, I know stuff nobody else knows.
Nobody else has.
Yeah, they're not going to know.
It's tricky.
And if it's like, so the one that I was particularly having fun with and wanted to give was one about localization sort of related problems.
Yeah.
And because so much work, so hard. I learned so much stuff, and I was like, if only there was a way where this had all been boiled down, in a way that I could use. Did the person who evaluated that, have they ever dealt with localization before?
You never know.
Probably not.
Because nobody in the industry has everything you need to know about localization.
But not from interestingly, not from a localizing team's perspective, which is actually you've seen there are the talks at GDC already
from a game developer
from like
perspective,
a deep technical developer standpoint, which is
and from a trying to bridge the gap thing, right? Because that's something I never see in any of these things is like I never see a developer talking about how to like handle on the dev side, saying like, here's how it ends up. Here's what Loc deals with, like the people doing translation. Here's what they deal with when you send them stuff over, nor vice versa, right? And it's like I've got the whole thing.
You got
the whole picture. Now let me ask you this: Was this the one that got rejected or just ignored?
That's a good question.
Or do you remember?
I think this is the one that got rejected. I think
they were like, definitely not that.
Definitely not the one that I
definitely
wanted to give.
not that.
Yeah, and the other ones. To be fair, that was the one I was more interested in. So the fact they just completely ignored the other two, feels.
Well, and this isn't even considering the other part about GDC talks, which is as soon as you submit a talk to GDC, suddenly you get 1,000 scam emails.
I forgot about that.
Because apparently they're just handing out your email address to everyone, just people on the street.
You can opt out of it if you live in California and go through a Byzantine opt-out process.
Yeah. And if you don't live in California, they're just going to give you your email address.
It is the case that GDC is far from the best sort of like.
Well, and that's
shit going on over there.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the other bit. Is it so talk submissions went live, and I was flipping through Blue Sky one morning and saw Rami Ismail put out just this rant about how it's like, hey, like GDC is open, but also it fucking sucks. And here's all the and I was like,
true.
Yeah, I was like, honestly, I agree with literally all of these reasons. And
unfortunate.
Well, I think the weird thing about GDC is GDC used to feel like, because there was a lot that was sucky about it the whole time, right? It's gotten suckier year over year, but it just always sucked a lot. Mostly just how fucking expensive it is.
This is expensive,
right?
Primarily.
It's just so expensive. But then over time, it became just like a cesspool of people trying. It's like wading into a modern email inbox. You know, it's just like, hey, can I buy your company? Hey, you want some crypto? Hey, it's just like became that. But there was a period of time where like it still, despite all of that, it felt like we had to, because there was so much important business stuff happening. There were so many learning opportunities, and then there was the cool stuff too, like again business opportunities, but also we get to meet people and talk.
I'd say more like it's sort of the reality of like when you have an event that has high value because of the network of people involved, it does attract sort of secondary networks that derive their value from those people, right? So that's like a given. Any industry conference of like a sufficient weight, if it doesn't have like your kind of like secondary food source people coming in who feed off of like the stuff you make, then it's probably not a very big conference. Like it probably doesn't have enough people in it, to be worth going to in the first place. So you're going to have that element of like, I'm talking to random people.
But are you going to welcome it and have that become all it is? Or are you going to?
Yeah.
And that's basically what GDC turned. It got shitified, right? It just like turned into increasingly.
For me, the turning point was when Google Stadia took over the entire second floor.
That was the last time
feel different,
wasn't it? Or was
that was the last time we went?
I think that was 2019 because it was that was, and we had talked about that where it's like there was this. The second floor of the Moscone Convention Center is where people hang out. Like after talks, people hang out there. You talk. There are tables. They just sold that whole space to Google to demo their Stadia.
You get to sit down with any other developers
and to demo like the modern tech way of like putting up a show floor piece where it's like really sparse and like they're trying to like draw attention to. They're trying to show you how much money and power they have more than anything. And then here's the cool tech we have on the inside of that, right? And so it was that like display, especially in 2019, when that was like the mobile industry was starting to collapse already at that point on the game side. And so everybody we talked to, it was just such a fucking bummer. Like all the people that we used to talk to who were like, we're just like doing so well on mobile.
The VR craze of 2017 was on its way
popped. Yep. So like everything was kind of already.
But it was all about blockchain and cloud gaming. Yes. That was 2019.
That's all it was. And so there was this, again, like as always, there was this read the room, problem where even if it wasn't absurd to go into the space where people who had gone to GDC year over year, because most do, if they go at all, they go as often as they can. That's like a tradition. That's an established place where you socialize and network. And the fact that a major company, ignoring the vibes, ignoring how things are supposed to be, et cetera, just came in and was like, nope, this is mine so I can advertise bullshit to you.
Well, my favorite part about it, though, is that there is an expo hall. Do you know what I mean?
There's already
they could have bought space there. Instead, they bought the space where everybody spends the whole time.
Where you sit and hang out after you're talking.
So they just forced everybody out. Like onto the street, basically.
So suffice to say, GDC is it's not the best. I will say that I did have one point of disagreement generally with like the whole not going thing, which is that it is still the case that it is very hard to make a lot of those initial connections business wise in this industry, right?
There's not really a replacement in the United States, I don't think, for
no, absolutely not. You can't. And like we've talked about sending cold emails and stuff like that, which is how we got a lot of our initial connections, right? It was just like me hunting people on LinkedIn. Typically, right? But like the place where those things get solidified because you put a face to a name, you have like a 30-minute chat with Apple or Google or Nintendo or whatever else, is events like GDC. Not necessarily GDC, but it is the biggest one in that way, right? And all these companies, their whole point of going is to meet with developers. So it's a different vibe than trying to like ambush a random Apple person who happens to be at like a not business event. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're there to talk to you.
Is DICE a more direct replacement for that purpose?
DICE is, but I think it's interesting. So people balk at the price of a DICE ticket, which is around like $2,000, I think.
Yeah, well, because there is no cheap ticket for DICE, right? Because GDC has like cheaper tickets for various access levels, right? But DICE just like it starts expensive and stays expensive,
right? However, it's in Vegas, in hotels in Vegas, which are made
absorb
for
far more people.
Yeah, and so like actually, I'm not sure, but I think the price when I go to when I went to DICE was probably actually a little bit less than when we went to like.
Oh yeah, our hotels in San Francisco were $400 a night in 2019.
Yeah, for a shitty hotel, like 6.
And the hotel was so bad.
Versus like I think my Vegas one was like maybe like $180 a night or something. It like was, and it was in the building where the conference was. And then they just had
so
like
if you're there for 5 days, like that upfront ticket price, might
it gets
all told.
Well, that is the thing about GDC is GDC's costs are actually like, you're right. People focus on the ticket price, which is, again, it's expensive, no doubt. But like we, even back when we were going, we would talk about how like, basically we're effectively spending $5,000 or more per person to attend. By the time you also take into account lost work, the fact that we always get sick, so then we lose more work. Yep. And so like once you take the opportunity cost into effect, we basically like we basically said like we lose like directly $5,000 each, plus probably another like $5,000 of productivity in the studio. So that the net cost of us going to as a trio to GDC, we're like that's basically like $20,000 to $30,000.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And that's really hard. Once you actually start putting the numbers to it from your time spend, from all the stuff, right?
Oh, deeply uncomfortable. Yeah.
It adds up to so much.
So just don't
like,
do that.
Can it possibly be worth it? The answer is like most of the time, no. Like it can't possibly make up for that.
Yeah. And so I think there's like the tricky part is, as people who are, I always get this bit, which is like, as people who are established in an industry, telling people not to do something when it remains actually one of the best, unfortunately or not, like networking tools for you, especially like in the early tier, is just, I feel like kind of missing.
Well, you need
I think it's stuff can be two things, right? Like it sucks, but also
what else is
still got to do it.
and especially
it's still a good thing to do.
Yeah, especially as an industry, as a industry veteran, right? If the recommendation is like, hey, don't do this, here's why, but it's removing a solution that people have, you're also in a position to know, go do this instead, And so that's actually the more important message than don't do this is, hey, these are good. You're going to get a better outcome here.
Yes.
And
anything on that note, I will say that like, if you want GDC stuff, but not that, getting involved with basically at most of the major conventions now, even if there isn't an explicit like business conference aspect. So PAXs in particular, oftentimes there's like a person deployed from one of the platforms, just one. Yeah. So
there's always a general representation of all the different major players.
Typically. It's like you basically send a note to one of those, either one of those people directly on like LinkedIn or whatever else, asking about, hey, is someone from the team going to be available at, hey, someone from Apple Arcade can be available at PAX West or whatever else, and see if you can just work your way in, that way.
It's and also so many of those people will they'll change their name on LinkedIn or Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever to be like, my name, Airplane, PAX West or whatever. So you can quickly get a sense of like who is actually going to this place if you just
you can hunt them down there.
You can hunt them down and kind of figure out who's around. Yeah. So I agree that there are if you're trying to talk to somebody face to face, then some kind of an event
it's good to do.
It's good to do.
If you're just going there for talks, don't.
It's
just hard to say it's worth it.
And then giving talks again, it's like there's a reason why you why we would consider giving a talk at something like GDC, which is because of the network post GDC, which is because we give good talks, we know that they're going to put them up on the YouTube channel at some point, right?
Yeah. And because people subscribe to that YouTube channel to look for talks, then we know it'll get discovered by people not at the event.
So,
I think we could put it up on our own YouTube channel, but it would get 500 views.
Yeah, nobody's gonna watch.
So what's
it's the ultimate frustration of these things too, right? Is because if you do a GDC talk, they may decide not to put yours up on YouTube and instead just keep it locked behind their fucking paid. So you put a whole talk together, you spend 40 to 80 hours putting a talk together, and you spend $20,000 of total lost money to go attend the event. And because even if they comp your ticket, that was the smallest part of the cost actually, right? So so then you go and you give the talk, right? And maybe to a room of anywhere between 10 and 100 people, who knows, which is a tiny audience in the moment for all that work that you put in, right? But even that might give you some really useful connections in the industry, right? But still, it's very small, and you're just rolling the dice as you do this for the impact on whether people see it and have an impact on them, whether people see it turn around, have an impact on you. Like just it's such an expensive dice roll. And then they turn around and they're like, if it's good enough, we'll put it on. If it's good enough and it's like been out for a year or whatever. Yeah.
There's a time. Who knows what the fuck.
We'll consider putting it up on YouTube as an advertisement so that people do the same thing again the following year instead of making everything that goes there public, right? And so, because there were like talks of GDC that I saw where I was like, oh yeah, I want to be able to like watch this again later, right? And then I just have to wait and hope that it will become available, or I think it's $500 a year, something like that, to get access to the vault. Or at least it was last time I saw it. It's probably worse now. But like the whole, it reminds me of publishing in research science, where for
like we own this now.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, when you publish, like if you're trying to publish a paper in like Nature or like one of the biggest journals or something, right? Then you get all this funding, you write all these grants, you're spending and then you like do this enormous amount of labor of trial and error over months and years trying to like get an answer to a question. Then you like write a paper, and then again you submit it to a journal and they're like, nah, right? But if they finally say yes, then they say, hey, yeah, we've accepted your paper. Pay us $3,000 and we'll publish it. So I think $3,000 is a good rate at Nature.
Right? And then when somebody else wants the paper, they got to pay for that
$30 to for a one-off download, or their institution has to have a subscription that charges it's abstracted, so who knows, right? Some enormous amount. So they basically like this is largely taxpayer funded, right? Research, and being done largely by grad students living in poverty, right? And then you turn around and you're like, here's this knowledge that the gatekeeper's going to now let us show people. And again, it's the same deal. If you don't get it in the biggest journals, then nobody sees it. And so you have to, and then they charge you to have.
But again, it's one of those like, it sucks, but also
the fuck else to go to do, you know?
Yeah.
We're all trapped in the machine, you know?
Yeah. So, but just like in a scientific journal, like if you email the authors of the paper, they'll just send you a copy of it.
Oh yeah, every time they'll just send it to you.
Because the journal doesn't own the paper; they just published it, right? Yep. So same thing with like if somebody gives a talk and they've got a video of it or whatever, you could just email them and be like, "Hey, do you have a link to that talk somewhere?" And they'd be like, "Yeah," and they'll just send it to you. So if they have a video of it. Anyways, let's talk about some studio stuff.
Let's go.
So first of all, our Flux plushes went out. Yeah. People have been posting pictures of all for those who aren't in the know, we did a limited run of plushes, which is a Flux and Juice Box plush
and Space
through Makeship and the Space Wrench. And we had to hit some threshold, I think, of 200 orders.
Yes.
I think we had 253. So they produced the limited run of these plushes and shipped them all out a bit earlier than expected. Actually, I thought they wouldn't be out for another month or two.
Mm-hmm. They also arrived simultaneously, basically, because they got shipped across the world, right? And one of our artist, she's in the Philippines, right? Mm-hmm. And she got hers, I think, 2 or 3 days before anybody else.
A little early,
like a little early. But that was like in the Philippines, right? And then, I think was 2 days ago. Yeah. So then like a couple days later, all of a sudden it arrives like to everybody simultaneously in the United States somehow, like across the whole country.
So we just have this flood of people posting pictures of their Flux.
Yeah, all within the span of like awesome. 24 hours.
Yeah. So thanks to everybody who bought those. I hope you're enjoying them. I think they're pretty cute. They're pretty good quality. And so, that's something we like to, do again at some point because it was pretty fun. Otherwise, this week we had our quarterly review, which this is something that we used to do this every quarter. That's why I called that. The idea behind the quarterly review is let's just like hit pause for a day and really just think through everything that's happened in the past 3 months. Try to make sense of it, look for any problems, think about good stuff that happened.
Surface if they haven't surfaced naturally,
just create space for conversations about the work that otherwise wouldn't have happened. We went for quite a while without doing them. I think a big part of it was like we were so on the grind with Crashlands 2, where like we knew what we had to do. We had everything established of how we were going to do it. And we were just kind of moving forward.
Paired with the fact that like we've made enough organizational changes in the last, 5 years that starting about halfway through Crashlands 2 development, coming out of the quarterlies no longer always produced a giant change. Which previous to that, it was like literally every quarter we're like, holy fuck, we've been doing this
long time
wrong,
podcast listeners or the maniacs who are like catching up on the backlog in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have heard those stories of like, we'll go to quarterly and we come back. The next podcast is all about like, here's all these major changes that we're making, right? And it was, as Sam said, every fucking quarter for the
like
first
5
10 years.
Yeah,
5 years, whatever.
Crazy. Once we started doing them, I think it was like 5 years. So
every quarter.
Our first quarterly review basically required an entire like 2 weeks of work to figure, like to basically just to unfuck everything that we realized was all messed up in the studio. So it's one of those catch-22 things, I think, where like if you feel too busy to do a quarterly review, you definitely need to do one.
100%. Yeah.
And if you're like, I don't think we need to do anything, because nothing has changed. You like basically like it's just a good thing to do, kind of always.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And we just kind of fell off the wagon, for a little while.
Well, I think they're a lot of work
they're a lot of work,
right?
So you never want to do it, and it's administrative work. It's just like planning out and talking and having meetings.
Because I was running them. So basically, Sam mostly used to be running them in the first phase, and then once I took over the CEO role, then I took that over as well. And preparing for each quarterly was like it was like a day of thinking about what I wanted to accomplish, drafting like the summary of what I think we need to get into, and do my own like initial thinking of trying to identify what I thought needed to be addressed.
Because we went from doing like standard boilerplate ones like at the very beginning to we made them like more elaborate over time, and then started taking like a angle. So we try to on top of like the boilerplate stuff that we knew we needed to clear.
Yeah, be like what's a thing that I think would be really
lens.
good to the lens that we would get into. And also this time around, because the team was so busy with stuff, because in the past two, we used to do it more as more of a swarm project, right? Where like somebody would be in charge and more or less kind of outline stuff was kind of that purpose, and make sure that we had a questionnaire, the questionnaire went out to the team, all that kind of stuff, right? And then we would kind of sit down together mostly to like read through it, figure out what to do.
Yep.
But I was like, everybody is so busy right now trying to get this fucking game out.
Yeah, you actually took all of it. So
I was just like, I'm going
and compile notes.
Pre-summarize stuff. And I also did all of so I would collect all of the employee feedback first, and then review that, and then use that to guide like, oh, here are the problems that I see in the studio based on what people are saying, and then like use that to create. So it became this.
Adam was basically doing a bunch of pre-processing during those.
Very monolithic effort, and my efforts to kind of save time with the team, which it did do because it gave Sam and stuff more time to do stuff. But it meant that the cost to me was like just it meant that
the cost was so high that we ended up just stopping doing that.
So there's a half or something.
So there's a middle ground.
Because for the first couple of years, like my time didn't need to be protected really at all, right? Because I had a lot of stuff that was important to be doing, but all of it had a lot of wiggle room in terms of timing. Sam stuff didn't, and so I was just like, I'll just absorb all of that. But then by the time we haven't had one for 6 months, basically, because I did the last one, and then we were getting ready. We were like getting into the final push to get the fucking game out, which of course took.
It was last July. It was like a year, right?
It was a year ago. Yeah. So that was when we were like, all right, we got to get this game out, and so I couldn't find the time at that point to
you were
do
now
that.
Swamped on the admin side.
Yeah, and I also couldn't see. I was like, but also, what if we have to like all go do it? Like everyone's. As Seth said, if it feels like you shouldn't be doing it, you probably should, and that's where we were. But we didn't, because
which is the hardest time to decide to drop it.
Well, I think it's also because the reality is the day-to-day progress on Crashlands 2 was insane in terms of speed, and so there's a visceral sense of loss.
It was hard to feel like you could derail that.
Yeah, you can get so much shit done in a day that we should pause for days. Like, but that's 30 things I could have done. So it's difficult. It's difficult to do it. It has that it's like the andon cord, which is that concept from it was like Toyota manufacturing, which is like, on the assembly line, if anybody spots a problem, they can pull the andon cord and freeze the entire factory, and then people figure out what the problem is. The weird thing about a quarterly review is it is an andon cord. It is a freeze everything for a day, but you haven't seen a problem. So you got to pull the cord to be like, is there a problem? Which is a harder thing to bring yourself to do.
Or even if you have seen problems, those haven't caused you to already pull the cord, right? there are things that like you know are there, but you're like, it's probably fine.
Progress is still going. It's fine.
Yeah, you've actively decided not to pull the cord, even though maybe you should have. And so a lot of what actually happens in each of these quarterlies is sometimes there's stuff that's revealed that we didn't know was a thing. More often, it's stuff that we knew was a thing, but had been treating as basically a non-issue. That we're like, wait a second, this probably is.
You suddenly see the sum of the impact in a nice little moment because we asked people.
And you're like, oh shit, we should have actually pulled the cord on this probably at some point.
So a big part of it is we do like basically a quote unquote waste management angle always on the quarterlies, which is from DevOps, looking at and Seth has a great talk on DevOps called stress-free. I think it's called stress-free
game development. It's a GDC talk.
It's very good
YouTube channel.
So if you're curious about the angle, one of the angles that's a big one actually that makes up the meat of these things, and we ask essentially everybody in the studio to fill out the same form that goes through those different kinds of waste, from like, when are you receiving defects in work, when are there handoffs that have holes in them, whatever else. And like I said before, all of our work has gotten just incredibly smooth, frankly, over the last 5 years. But we always find something. And so this time around, it was like, oh, okay, there's a little hole, which is a very common hole because it's one of the hardest ones, which is the handoff problem.
Handoffs have always been the hole,
where it's like, okay, let's say you're working on a project with someone, you're relying on them for, I don't know, maybe you guys are kind of passing the baton back and forth because you need something from them. Then you got to do something, need some feedback. Then you got to do stuff with it, whatever. It's just that process of like the fact that you got to package up whatever it is you're doing in a way that someone else can, of course, ingest, and then send it to them in a way that they're going to get it. And then importantly, know that they got it, which is a different thing. Because it's like you can send someone an email. You don't know if they
actually that's the whole know that they got it part is the problem, right? Is that you need a reliable means where you can guarantee that it gets in front of somebody, coupled with the confidence that if it has gotten in front of somebody, that they have systems in place that mean that will now get taken care of, right?
Yes.
And if you don't have either of those two bits, either the thing that you can guarantee that somebody sees it or the thing that you can guarantee that have they seen it, it will be dealt with, then you end up in this, you're just always in this uncertain state where now you are monitoring it, trying to figure out do I need to follow up? Like, what do I need to do?
I would say it's the sort of thing where it's like a tethered handoff. It's like you aren't able to fully let go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a big mental loop then that you're stuck in, especially if you're bouncing a couple different projects of people where you just have this ongoing cycle in the back of your mind, which is like, oh yeah, I haven't heard back from them yet. Did they get that thing? Do they need help with that thing? Like, is it in progress? And so we found basically a couple of these instances where through a combination of things, one of which is kind of comically is the shape of Blork. Blork is so good. That's our internal work tool that Adam built that essentially is like largely about dependency management and surfacing work at the correct time. The correct time meaning because it's both prioritized and actually doable by you or by the team. And it's the whole thing's put together so well that like, I don't know. We've been using it now for a year and a half or something like that, I guess.
We've been using it since we did the last quarterly.
Yeah. That's actually
a little over.
We kind of like we got Blork up and running a month before the last quarterly. Like we got the team onboarded, so we had only been using Blork for like a month. I think
it was last March-ish is when the prototype became kind of like enough that people could use it, and then it was like the next month where we like moved to it, and then
it did. And the thing is, Blork did solve so many of these like general DevOps problems for us, which probably explains why we were like, oh fuck it, we don't need quarterly. But the interesting one that came up is basically because it does auto surface things to you at the appropriate time. Then there's a couple of like implicit like user assumptions, right? Which is like, oh, if I just check my thing off, whoever needs to be alerted about it, whoever needs to find out about it, will find out.
Or more importantly, if somebody, but this is kind of the problem of remote work in general, is that like you got to use the tools of remote work. So if you've got a task that somebody else is waiting on, right? They're like, that they're waiting on it. They know that they're waiting on it. But if they haven't created a task in Blork that's connected to the one that you're doing, then when you check that off,
doesn't matter.
Nothing pops up on their end, right? And so if only one person is using the tool kind of like to its maximum, and then somebody else is just like only sometimes putting stuff in there, then stuff just falls through the cracks, right? And the same thing kind of goes with like if you like. So I'd spoken with so we have flexible work hours, so people can kind of set their window of time. And I had kind of a funny conversation with Carl about the fact that so he has a kind of a shifted shifted workday. So he starts at like 5:30 in the morning,
Mhm.
and then he's done at like 2:30. And he had expressed that he was like, he always felt weird about being done mid-afternoon because everybody else is still working. And he's just kind of like subconsciously worried about that other people will over time like start to think like, oh, he's just like always got an early out without realizing that he was there early. But it's because we work remotely that it's not like we all like come into the office and see that like he's there and has been there for a while.
Yeah, has like 3 empty mugs next to him or something.
Yeah, like so many things when you work remotely happen invisibly unless you purposely draw attention to them through sending messages in Discord or whatever the case may be. And so it's kind of a combination where like the tools need to support these kinds of automatic surfacing behaviors, but also you have to recognize like how you're using the tool and what other people can see of that usage.
Yeah.
You know.
Also, I think so. We did come out of it with then this like, okay, we have this handoff hole that's shown up in kind of in everybody's work at some point. And so everyone and different people have like essentially moved to solve it manually in a number of ways, whether that's essentially always pinging someone on Discord if you completed a task related to theirs that you know is related to theirs, or like adding another Blork task for them to check, whatever, like all these little odds and ends manual ways of doing it. And so we did make an update to Blork that allows us to just actually do a very good job now of essentially auto surfacing those things that are connected within the system. And so again, that does rely on you actually connecting things within the system. But given that that's like the whole thing about Blork, I feel like it's not like a power user thing. It's literally
the
whole point is setting up dependencies.
Yeah, and that's been the thing we're trying to figure out with a tool like this, right? Is you're trying to this is a DevOps thing too, right? You're trying to remove discipline from the equation of discipline being like somebody has to do something. Somebody has to do something. They have to know they have to do something, and they have to do it. And all of those are optional, right?
Yep.
And so the discipline is basically doing a thing you're supposed to do and doing it correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
What tools are supposed to do is make it so that discipline isn't required to accomplish whatever the goals are, because you're basically removing all the parts of that you can. So removing the part that somebody has to remember because you've got something that at the right time informs them, all that kind of stuff. And our quest through all of our work management systems over the years has been basically, for that, is to find something that will actually just make it so we're not like, okay, here's how this system works, and then like make sure you do it exactly how we described, or else it all goes to shit. Right? And here we still had this case here in Blork, which is that like there wasn't a way to see that, like, or you could technically see, but it meant you had to go like spend time scanning stuff, like
you had to do a mental diff, basically, which is not really possible,
No, especially as stuff grows and scale and stuff, it just becomes too much.
We made it visible. So that was like the big win. And then otherwise, it's just a bunch of smaller little bits and bobs. Because
I think it was that basically like visibility of a handoff problem, which again ever present, but we were like, oh, there's actually an easy solution, partial solution to this, right? But the other one was related to handoffs too, was just defects. Which is a general theme we kept on seeing was that like within Blork, which is where so much of our work is managed, it wasn't obvious that you had received a handoff. So like that's a problem, right? But also we still have to use these other systems, right? So like using email, using other kind of stuff, right? And like I'd been operating on the assumption where for so much admin management, it's like with third parties, it's gone through email, right? And like I've been operating under the assumption that when I send an email to somebody, they're going to see it and they're going to deal with it, right? And then we discovered, as Seth has been taking over admin stuff, that like his stuff was being shown just as read already.
Yeah, right.
Only some of them though.
Some of them, some of the time.
Like
right?
some of my emails. So like Gmail has filters that you can use to do all kinds of things, right? And this I don't know why this works like this, but like there's also a labeling system which you can use to sort of like categorize your emails. So
it's basically trying to manage the fact that everything just gets delivered to your inbox.
Everything just goes to your inbox. Right? So I was like, okay, well, like for example, if I've got stuff related to taxes, then I can add a taxes label to those, and that way, if I click on the taxes label, I just see all the emails. But if I have to manually assign those labels, I'm just going to fuck it up every time, right? So it's like, okay, maybe like every email
versus an automated system.
So like, all right, every email that comes from our accountants, I'll just use a filter and automatically apply the taxes label to that, right? Because like that's the only reason I would be talking to them. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently, just somehow or another, whenever that label gets applied, it also marks the email as read. So it looks like I've already seen it and dealt with it, and it doesn't pop up to the top. It's like I'm using inbox 0, but then it would be like I would open up an email and then I would see like a couple of red things in there, and I'm like, I feel like, so did I already deal with? Did I just forget?
Especially in long email, because we're in the middle of some business negotiations right now, and those email threads,
They're like 70, 80 emails
they
long.
get long. And so, and you'll see a little snippet of like the latest email, right? But as anybody who's like dealt with, I mean, all email clients, are variably bad at it, but dealing with a long email thread, you open up the email and like the email client has to figure out like which is the new one, and then has to try to guess based on formatting what the old ones are, because when you like do a reply, it's sending the whole ass fucking collection of messages that were sent before. That's actually how that works, right? And so I noticed in particular on mobile Gmail, it cannot fucking handle these nested, these like long lived threads, and I'll open it and also like pop somewhere else, but
I'm learning more and more like email is just like an eldritch horror of legacy code. It's just people made assumptions like 40 years ago.
Man, it has
coming up with how email works.
Yeah,
it just hasn't really changed.
There's no good visibility tools. There's none of that kind of stuff, right? And so,
the reality is, I think it's because it is work to do, but it is not existing within a work management framework. Yeah. And so it's like you have the double problem of like, okay, yeah, you got to set up tasks to do things about emails, but you don't necessarily pair them. And
it's made so private, right? Because I can't go to a work management system like Blork or something and be like, oh, here's a link to that email. Like, hey, I need you to go, reply to this, right? Can't be done. Cannot be done because my inbox,
which is by design.
Yeah, which is by design. Yeah. My inbox and your inbox have different IDs for the same email, different URLs for the same email. There's no way to do that across that boundary, right? And so we're always trying to keep things out of emails as much as we can, but the reality is like so much stuff goes through third parties that you're not going to ask a third party to go join whatever the fuck your work management tool is. That's not going to happen. And so you're stuck with it. So there were some elements here, and then otherwise it was just realizing that so many handoffs, a constant frustration that each one of us had felt at various points was just like, we would get something, somebody wanted us to do something, and they would give us enough information to know what it was that we needed to do, but nowhere near enough information to be able to do it without either having to go search for stuff or to ask follow-up questions. And that had become like an increasingly frustrating burden. And so
basically, if you ever got an email from like a boss or colleague and they're like, hey, could you look into this? You're like, You're like,
what do you want from me though? Do you need a report? Do you want me to just look at it and say nothing? Like, what are we doing?
It's the idea of the goal is a self-contained handoff, right? Where you send, even if you're deep in the bowels of an email thread and you're like replying again, right? And all the information that is needed for the thing you're talking about is somewhere in that thread,
Technically.
It's probably in there somewhere. But if you're already in there and you're asking someone to do something, you're trying to, and most importantly, you're trying to make sure it happens successfully with a low error rate, right? Then the best move is to go collect all of the relevant information and put it right there. If you're pinging somebody in Discord or Slack or whatever, and you're like, oh, hey, can you go handle whatever? Provide a link to the thing. Provide a link to...
You also, if it's referred to as like a project-based emailing approach. I think Cal Newport was the one who came up with that in the deep work. But if you're not familiar with this, just go. It takes like a minute to like read about kind of theoretically a little bit more about why this is good. But if you start doing it, you will notice that you'll just have less nonsense.
There's no more back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So it might seem like a sort of thing where you're like, but that takes like an extra, 4 minutes for me to like get the person a link to the thing that I'm talking about and spell out like what specifically it is actually explicitly that I would like in return for them to do it. But
they're going to ask for all that shit later.
They're going to ask
one thing at a time while you're in the middle of other things, and it's going to take 20 random minutes out of your day.
Yeah, or
tomorrow and throughout the week.
Yeah. Or even if it doesn't come back to you in that way, it means that because that person has to do all that same stuff to figure that out, they're less equipped to go do it because they're not the one currently thinking about it.
Because they don't know what the hell you're talking about. They have to guess what you wanted and go find it.
It increases the likelihood that they won't do it right now because it seems like too much effort, right? So they'll do it later, and now it falls through the cracks. It increases all kinds of defects.
So I think about this is like the test-driven development of communication, right? Because test-driven development for programming is like, let's say I write like a simple function that, I don't know, maybe it like splits up a sentence based on punctuation or something, right? Into an array. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty straightforward problem. I know what I'm doing. I coded it up. It's 8 lines long. There's no way this thing could go wrong. And I just start using that function, and then I just push. I just git push that thing and just send it off to QA.
Send
right? And then meanwhile, like Sam is trying to run the game using this shit code that I just wrote, and he's getting some crashes. And then QA also sends me a ticket, and they're like, yeah, this thing isn't working over here. And now I'm fielding a bunch of random reports from multiple different places while I've already moved on. I'm in the middle of something else, you know? So then I come back and then I got to diagnose it, you know?
Yeah, I think the funniest thing about defects is that typically, depending on like organizational structure, you'll see these like really funny. I mean, I think they're funny from the outside, but like the war zones where you have these factions that develop that in many ways are just the result of someone moving work downstream too soon. Where like if
they're not testing their stuff before they send
exactly.
it. You know?
So if you're not keeping the work with you before, if you're not letting it leave at the right moment, then you just end up creating this situation where like, yeah, the devs are just like their QA's like,
QA,
and then the QA team's like, guys, fucking devs won't stop sending us broken shit all the time, and then blaming us for stuff. And the devs are like, why is everything breaking when I send it to QA? And it's like, it's not.
Yeah. So test driven development then is like, I write the code, which I think is simple and can't possibly break.
Because of course you do. Because
of course I do, because I'm amazing and nothing I do is ever wrong. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to spend an extra 5 minutes writing a test, which is it's just something that runs that function. It just uses that function where it's like, if I give it this sentence, here's what I should get back. Right. And I think I have like a few different examples to break it, you know?
Yeah. To do that, to write those tests, what you first do is you try to enumerate all of the things that you would have needed to think about so that you could provide
what could go wrong? What could go wrong using this function?
And to me, like that's the crux of it is when you're communicating is that people are focused on saving time more than anything in the moment more than anything.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
They're not actually asking the question.
I want to save absolute time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to save absolute time.
Honestly, I don't want to save any time. I want to avoid defects. That's what I want. I want to avoid defects. And I think that's the thing is like trying to switch to that model of saying, when you're setting a piece of communication and just saying like, is this self-contained? What kind of defects am I going to get from the content?
What kinds of questions am I going to get back where that person is confused about what I'm talking about?
A question is a defect.
You know?
If someone needs to clarify.
A non-programmer, perfect example, I feel like everybody deals with all the time. If you're sending emails to people, you got a link to a Google Doc, a Dropbox, a file that's on some cloud-based service. And
I know what you're going to say.
You're like, I need to send this to some random person, either in the organization, outside the organization, whatever. Write up a little note to them. You think you do it good. Here's all the information you need. I put it in this file. Here's this report. Boom, send it. The person replies back a day or two later, and they're like, I can't
access it.
Yep.
So what do? It's like, well, okay, just build into your workflow when you make your email, whatever else. Open that fucking link in incognito mode, okay? Like if it's going to an outsider, you know, if it's like a view only thing, or if there's some other way,
or check the permissions on it.
Check the fucking share button.
Yeah, before you do it, because like again, so annoying, and also for the other person, it's like you're delaying getting your own shit finished because oftentimes you just need like feedback from someone about something. They have a moment that they've carved out in their day. You might have missed that fucking email where they're like, "This doesn't open." That's all they say, of course.
Yeah. So now they can't do anything. So then they just have to move on to something else, and you've moved on to something else, and now both of you have to stop what you're doing at some point later.
It's just the worst.
To come back to this thing.
And this is again as an example of like something requiring discipline, right? Which sucks because there are
communication is all about discipline, though.
Exactly. Communication is about discipline.
It's a manual process every time.
Yep. And there's stuff that you can do, and there's like tools you can use to help assist, that kind of stuff, right? But there's a limited degree to which you can do it because for it to go off perfectly, it means even if the tools are good, they have to be used correctly, right? You don't get to make any assumptions when it comes to a person-to-person handoff of information, a request to do something, whatever. And so that's like the core category that ultimately boils down to like, discipline is required, which means people need to be disciplined and figure that out. And everybody has to, you have to learn over time. Because for me, when I'm going to share a link with somebody, I go through the tedious pain in the ass process of like, oh,
That's always annoying.
I made a thing for somebody. I'm going to share it, which means I need the link. If I need the link, that means I have to make sure the right people can access it, and only the right people. So I check my share settings. Like there's a loop that has now become ingrained in my process because I think about the whole pipeline of like, I'm making a thing. It's for the subset of people who needs to see it. Why? Do they have what they need? Blah, blah, blah. Right.
Yeah. And again, it sounds like really boilerplate shit, but you would be, I guess, perhaps if you've worked, I think, probably at all in like with a larger team than 2 people, you would probably not be surprised at just how much this gunks up what should be like, I don't know, the enjoyable part of working. You know what I mean? Like getting into flow states,
back and forth,
nailing some stuff, collaborating with someone, having cool stuff come out. Like it's so much of this. It just gets
no back and forth. How about only fourth?
Only fourth.
So yeah, because we in DevOps, it's the core idea is if you think about all the work like an assembly line, which is that stuff moves in a forward direction, right? So like if a car, it doesn't go backwards. It goes backwards when something got fucked up, right? Like a car goes down the assembly line. And then downstream, somebody's like, wait a minute, this door is on backwards or something, right? And it's like, oh God. And then we got to take the car off the assembly line, remove the door, take it back upstream, put it back up there, send it through again so somebody can put the door on properly. That's exactly what's happening when you send somebody something and they reply with, I need more information. I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Or,
right?
and this is the insidious part is, or when they go spend a whole bunch of time searching for things, like trying to get all the stuff that they need to do it, which you don't see that happen. That's fucking invisible,
true.
Right?
Yeah.
And to me, like that was one of the things that I'm always paying attention to is like, I would, even in the case, and there's like, you also get this asymmetry between like employee-employer relationships and stuff too, where an employer is like, don't waste my time. Here's almost no information, right?
That's true.
Don't waste my time. It's my job to waste your time.
Yeah, you'll go figure it out and you'll spend the time doing it, right? And so you get a lot of this asymmetry when like your goal should always be to say like, again, the goal isn't about saving time. The goal is making sure this thing moves in one direction and does so effectively and efficiently with low chances of error. And the moment somebody has to go search for something, the moment they have to ask a clarifying question, and at least that one you'll see when people ask clarifying questions, so you can like use that and get better at it over time. But if you're relying on people to just basically like go do the work that you didn't provide them, context clear stuff for, again, a URL is your friend. Just if there can be a link, have a link and share it, right? Like,
well, and the insidious thing about this is communication is ad hoc and it feels different every time. So like if over the course of a week, I've sent 20 emails to 20 different people about 20 different things. Mm-hmm. And 17 of those people came back with, hey, can you clarify this or can you give me more stuff?
Oh my God.
I can come up with reasons to myself for every single scenario as to why each of those was a one-off thing that was kind of unavoidable. Right. Or I can blame these other people.
Well, and it's hard to identify a pattern that you could fix too, right? Of like a general thing you could have done.
Yeah. And also because the reply is disconnected in time from the action, right? Like I might hear back on Thursday from somebody I sent an email 2 weeks ago or whatever, right? And so I'm getting these defects in a very like loosely coupled way that's hard. It's easy for me to convince myself that I'm not the problem and that I don't really need to change anything.
The reality is that like the asynchronicity, which is always present in work. I know people talk about it a lot in remote work, but it is always present. It has always been present. It is always present. Yeah. But in synchronous, like in immediate conversation with someone, there's a reason why people don't talk like this, right? Because it's so fast and easy to ask clarifying questions because you're not, and you get into it right
That's why people have meetings all the time.
Exactly.
Because they can't just...
Yeah, trying to actually effectively communicate is so intense because you have to assume so many things. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an upfront cost that you don't necessarily have to bear in. But I would say like a meeting actually is the same shape because a meeting is usually like the meetings as normally done are broadcasts, right? In which case that should have been treated the same way you would treat an email or something else, right? But for like a live collaboration, it's so fast for people to triangulate together, like what is needed, what's unknown, whatever, that it's still better. It's still way better if you do some preliminary work so that you think you know what you're getting into, right? And you're going to have a much better time if you do that. But that kind of communication allows things to be effectively surface instantly, not separated by people trying to do stuff, right? It's like it's all happening right there in the moment. But again, even still, but it also tricks you into thinking because it's still actually better had everybody thought about it ahead of time.
Oh, 100%. Well, that's why the joke is like meetings are typically a waste of time.
Yeah.
Right. For exactly this reason. Because it's like you still need some of that preparatory stuff, but it's just the fact that you can essentially get by with people just engaging as people in that context with whatever information is in their brains that you can kind of, suss this
and it feels fast and efficient because you're like, hey, we just like sat down and talked about it. I didn't have to do that extra, preliminary work, right?
The work that always was going to have to be done no matter what.
Yeah, the outcome would have been different. It would have been faster. It would have been more efficient, the way around. But again, I think efficiency is the wrong metric to be focusing on. It should be focusing on defects, right? And it's just
and of course, all those clarifying, like you're saying, all those clarifying questions are defects. The funny thing about this is when people say this meeting could have been an email. It actually couldn't have been if the way somebody approaches an email is the way they normally approach an email, which is to barely send any information. Yep. You know what I mean? Because when somebody like you're saying, when somebody prepares for a meeting, they prepare for it. They put together all the information and then they present it, right? Yeah. And like if they do that when they're writing emails, then that meeting could have been an email. But nobody fucking does that.
And here's the thing. I think the reality is like it's kind of like security, right? Which is like if you're only focused on like maximum security, then you're still getting it wrong or like testing, right? If you
still have to be able to do things.
Exactly. The goal is actually is that the work must flow, right? So whatever is you find there's some optimal level of communication here, right? And the point is that
you can't write a novel for every email.
You can't possibly know like what the fuck someone else's full context is, for everything.
Yeah. The main idea is being just like careful with your assumptions, right? Because like I should be able to assume that like everybody on our team knows how to use Google Drive, right? Like I assume that isn't like if I give somebody a Google Drive link, I don't have to be like, also here's instructions for how to like log into Google Drive, right?
Yeah. But that's it. It's like, what do you mean by how to use, right? And it's going to depend on the context of what I'm trying to get somebody to do, right?
Because and that's where like because
I got to go with these from this morning though, because like this morning I saw Workflow had a cool patch that came out, and they have this cool way of doing like sorting that they added. You just type /sort and then you could pick from a way of sorting a list, right? Whatever, cool shit. Adam's into web stuff, so I saw that, but it's in their forums, which I had to log in to get to. So at first I just linked it. I was like, hey, look at this cool thing Workflow did about. Linked it, and then I was like, oh wait, he won't be able to fucking log in. So I went and downloaded the GIF. So again, who's bearing the cost of this computer, right? I go download the GIF and shove it into Discord so that he can not have to fuck with that because I want him to get the thing. You know what I mean?
Then I had all the info I needed because I literally didn't even click the link once Sam said, oh, actually,
because you didn't need to. Just look at this.
That's the beauty of it, right? Yeah.
Just a complete package of information so Adam could see that and go, all right, I know exactly what you're talking about. Good idea. I'm gonna think about that.
But again, it's like trying to make sure you know what your assumptions are, and if you, no matter what your position is and what your role is, if you're basically saying, I'm trying to avoid other people having to spend their time and other people having to interrupt me. If you're trying to, if you try to make both of those be true with all the stuff that you're doing, then and you just ask, like, what assumption am I making about this thing that I'm asking? Again, like there are things you can do all the time. Like I can assume somebody can open a link and drive on our team, right? Mm-hmm. The moment it goes outside of our team, I can't assume that anymore. Yep. Right. We work with a lot of people in mainland China. They don't have Google services there, right? Or it's not officially. You can so sometimes they have access and sometimes they don't, which means every time I'm talking to anybody for anything related to mainland China stuff, I always ask, can we use Google Drive for this or do we need to use something else, right? So it's about like knowing what your assumptions are and checking those as part of the whole communication that's going on.
Well, actually, Seth, I think we have the question from last week that we got some more info on. It's actually related to this, right?
We do. We're coming up toward running out of time.
Let's just hit it real quick because it's a quick one. In this context, it's already been answered.
Yeah. So this was a question that we had hit on, I think, the previous episode, but then we were like, oh, we don't know what this person is talking about, which kind of relates to exactly what we were just talking about, which is there wasn't enough context in this question for us to know because the question referred to an episode 50 episodes ago or something like that. And we don't remember. And so we didn't have the information. So we couldn't answer the question.
Yeah, this is a great example of that idea of like something that's fresh for you. You have to ask yourself, is this fresh for the person that I'm talking to? Right. Because if there's any likelihood at all that it's not, then they will not know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So we saw this question, couldn't answer it because we didn't have sufficient context. We had to. Now we're coming back to it because there was a defect. Okay. So this question came from a while back from Belkmaster 5000, who said, "I want to play the 20 question art game mentioned in episode 475. Will you please share them? The 20 questions to guide them all." So we had Sampy go back to that episode and figure out what that was about. And this related to Sam's art process on using a set of questions to understand the constraints of a piece of art that he's making before bringing it into a game so that he doesn't produce defects in the art that would require it to be redone.
Yes, exactly. So and this is separate. The reason that we had the confusion about it was because I have other lists for other parts of art. So this is
we got a lot of lists.
Yeah, so that's why we had to go and save it back to go check it out. But yeah, so to cover it quickly, it works like a surgeon's checklist. So the idea is when Seth and I get started designing anything new to put into the game, because it's a game art asset, the reality is that there are dozens of hard constraints that need to be kept in mind with regards to that asset that if you don't answer the question ahead of time, means that you'll very easily just design the wrong thing. So what I mean by that is things like, is this thing going to be solid in the game world? Why does that matter?
As in things can't pass through it.
Yeah, things can't pass through it. Is the answer yes or no? If the answer is yes, then I need to make it in such a way that it's rooted to the ground. It needs to very clearly be attached to the fucking ground because it's solid and the player can't go underneath it. They can't go over top of it, right? So I need to do that. And then the question of how tall is it? How big is it? Is it going to obfuscate things in the background based on where it's placed, based on if it's solid? So if it's a 2x2 solid object that is tall, well, now it's going to obfuscate the player walking behind it. So how many of these are going to show up?
Is that okay?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Sizing, right? So a lot of this has to do then with origins, bounding boxes, some of this more technical stuff on the game art side. Let's say that we make a creature that vomits out a projectile. I say this to you, maybe you're an artist, you're like, cool, I'm gonna make like some gooey shit. What direction is the projectile oriented? Where's the front of it pointing on your canvas? If it's an orb, so if it's a ball, it needs to, of course, just be like centered, and the bounding box needs to have a middle pixel. So you need an odd number of pixels for that bounding box. If it's a bullet style projectile that comes at you or just shoots out, it needs to be oriented to the right. Okay.
Yeah, because Game Maker uses 0 degrees as right. And so if we say this bullet is traveling at 45 degrees, then we should be able to rotate it to just rotate the sprite to 45 degrees and it'll just look like it's pointing in the correct
direction. Early on.
Yeah. And if every bullet is a different orientation when it comes into the system, then now you have to come up with an offset where you're like, oh shit, this one's starting, so I have to like subtract whatever.
You just got to keep doing extra work downstream to correct the rotation of every bullet.
One of the things that used to drive Seth insane, understandably, was that randomly I would draw some things facing the left and some things facing the right. Problem is, if a thing moves, we're going to need to X-flip it when it starts moving the other way. So, just, so it's going to look that direction, right? It's going to look left, look right. But if some of the things naturally, when they are exported, are looking to the right, and then you X-flip them, now they're looking left. If some of them are looking left, and now they're going to look right, and their code doesn't make any fucking sense. So it's like, okay, does it look around? Does it move? Because now it needs to be looking to the right too. Okay. Is it going to be like broken apart for a bunch of, spine pieces and stuff like that? In which case we need to make another asset, which is an icon associated with that thing. That's them all recombined.
A static image.
A static image.
One.
Is some part of this going to be drawn on the map? So we need to there's basically this cascade of additional waterfall assets that come out. This is like Crashlands 2 related specifically. And then there's like 1,000 of these where it's just.
Well, and there's just environmental considerations, like where is this thing going to show up and how is its color palette going to interact with the environment, in terms of brightness or color composition.
Well, even if you got even deeper than that is like because again, like that still feels to me like in the realm of art where it's like you're trying to make good color comps or whatever else, right? But there's where the art interacts with the game programming is where typically all the problems show up. And so shaders is the user example of this. We have a bloom shader.
How's bloom going to impact it?
Yep. Yeah. So how is bloom going to impact it? Bloom in Crashlands 2 begins ramping around the 80 value mark. So
of luminosity.
Of luminosity. So basically an image
which is different from the value, because you got like HSL, which is hue, saturation, luminosity. And you also have HSV, which is hue, saturation, value. Those are different numbers. Luminosity is a perceived brightness.
Yes, it takes into account the vibrancy of colors.
So because like green is perceived by the human eye as way more vibrant than blue. So if you're thinking like RGB, I think blue only contributes like 7% of its value to the luminosity.
Yes.
And green is like 70%. Whereas if you're using HSV, then it just treats all colors as equal.
Yes.
Right. Which is so like, again, how do your shaders work? And does your artist have access to like HSL sliders so that they can evaluate the luminosity of the things that they're making?
Could you just like, look at it and then, I don't know, eyedrop it, bring up a levels thing in like Clip Studio Paint and see where your values are peaking out? Are they peaking out below some point or like at the beginning of the ramp, or are they blown out? Like, is it the case as soon as you put this in the game and boot it up, you're going to be like, oh,
it's just Bloom City.
It's Bloom. Yeah, it's just blown
And if you can't
out.
see it there, is it part of your checklist to, once you get it in the game, to check what happens when you do the things that cause it to go into these different scenarios?
100%. So like when we do art, part of what was so nice about bringing Ann on with the pipeline we have is that I was able to fully set her up to do the integration too. So especially it was so fun watching her the first couple of months, because it was like, I'd say, okay, here's this, here's a table we need. And I'd tell her, I would then list out like, here's all the things you need to do before you send me anything. So yeah, first you do like a little sketch, whatever else it needs to be. It's going to be solid, which means X, Y, Z. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. Like, here's all the constraints. But once you do it, put it in the game, walk around it with Flux's feet, because her feet are slightly, they're outside of the exact point at which she collides with things. If you make the edge of something a little too tall or whatever else, then it'll look like she's standing on it in like a funky, dumb way if she's just bumping up against it. Can you walk around it? Right? There's all this shit that, and these are the things we're typically depending on an artist's like integration with the programming, and like how much the studio has invested in full pipeline support for an artist to do integration, where you see all the holes show up. An artist is like, I made an asset that's cool as fuck. It does hit various specs, but I can't test it in game because I can't even put it in there and like hook it up. So,
So even if you have a checklist, there might be stuff not on the checklist.
But also importantly, this now creates this like asynchronous defect problem, which is the artist creates something like, this is cool, and the programmer comes back and tells them it's not cool.
Yes.
Right? They're like, the programmer is now the villain, as opposed to there just being a standard checklist where the artist themselves goes through the checklist, sees that they themselves have created a problem that doesn't jive with the checklist.
Yeah, it's being able to test
fixes
yourself.
the problem, test it yourself. Yeah.
Seth and I's like working relationship has become almost purely just like collaborative in nature, as opposed to having a lot of this like more just like Seth handling defects, basically, back and forth in one way or another, because I get to have the whole pipeline. So those are some of them. That's like a bunch of them. I had a more robust list that was like written down when we had first gone through this process that has since been lost.
But the important thing is have one. Like,
every time you make a mistake like this, just put it on the fucking list and look at it. It takes like 2 seconds and saves you so much time. So much time.
As they say, what is it, like regulations are written in blood, Like whenever something goes wrong, think about why that happened. Well, first, the first part is recognizing that it is something that has gone wrong, which is where we're talking about like with communication. People don't really think about it that way. It's just like, oh, somebody just had a question for me about this thing I told them to do. No, what that means is like, you didn't tell them enough. You didn't figure out what they needed and give it to them. And now they're coming back to you with a problem that you've created.
Well, and especially because I think it's when there's a feedback loop where the details always feel small. Because even with an art asset where like you get it delivered, whatever, and someone's like, oh, you need to adjust this like 2 pixels to the right, otherwise this bad thing happens, right? That feels like nothing. Like it feels like nothing. And then the other person's like, yeah, I can easily shift that over, right? Except what had to happen to get there is
evaluation,
all the pipeline stuff, you got it through. Yep. There's a build involved now, all this kind of stuff that has to go back, and the artist has to open up that program again. And it might have been any amount of time since they last looked at that art asset to go find it, get it booted up. So yeah, ultimately all they had to do was shift something 2 pixels to the right, and all the programmer had to see was that, oh, this is a little janky because it's 2 pixels to the left, right? Mm-hmm. That was all that had to happen. And that's what it looks like is what happened. But what actually happened is this fucking enormous
pipeline. You have to engage
Herculean
the whole pipeline.
Amount of effort. Yeah. And that's what you're trying
Stuff
to
is
do.
clogged in the pipeline, and now it's going up the pipe instead of down the pipe. And it's horrible. So yeah, it's a good way to think about things. So hopefully that's useful to people. And if anybody else has any interesting stories about this kind of stuff, drop it in the questions over at podcast.bscotch.net. We always love to hear about how people are applying the things
for avoiding having to have discipline, or for making it easy to have discipline, in either case. Yeah.
Maybe we need to reframe the questions page to just like drop us a note.
Stuff.
Yeah, because like we also like to just hear interesting things. It doesn't have to be a question for us. Just like if you got interesting observations about some of the stuff that we're talking about, feel free to drop those in there. That's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the archives. And if you haven't yet, get on over to Steam, Google Play, and the App Store. Pick up a copy of Crashlands 2, pick up Levelhead, pick up all the games. Give them all good reviews, because they're good.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all I have to say about that. We'd appreciate that. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye.